One of the most exciting aspects is how are we going to integrate into their crew and get to work on the space station, doing the research and performing the spacewalks and the station upgrades and helping us continue that mission of discovery. The International Space Station is this unique place that we have built over the course of a decade with 100 launches and 100 spacewalks to assemble it on orbit. It lets us remove gravity from all of our science experiments. You've all seen video of balls of water floating around and morphing it, and we can do that with other materials and see what properties we aren't able to see when gravity just squashes everything flat. That knowledge helps us make life better on the ground. I've had the privilege of spending more than 200 days on the International Space Station, and what is crystal clear to me is how important the International is.
In the International Space Station, together we accomplish more than we could by ourselves. Together we tackle all the problems that dynamic nature of space throws at us. The more we explore, the more we try to overcome all those challenges of living in weightlessness in a high radiation environment and how to counteract those things, the more we learn about how the human body works. But a long-duration mission is something really to cherish because it's a unique opportunity to let your body fully adapt, and then at some point you reach this kind of steady state where you are working and living in space, and that's your normal. Spaceflight is hard. It's dynamic, it's unpredictable, but that's no different than the way it's always been. And just being able to watch the agency navigate those decisions over the last several months and balance the risk and the safety of the crew has been phenomenal. And what is crystal clear in that entire process is the commitment to making sure that when we launch crews, we're going to bring them home safe. I'm excited to get back to the space station. I'm excited to be part of Expedition 72 so we can get to work, because that's what this is all about. It's about exploration, exploring the human body, exploring Earth, exploring the universe. It's about discovery. It's about learning. It's about how do we imagine the impossible and make it possible.
And welcome back here to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Just a quick programming note. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you refresh your browser, because that will allow you to chat with us, not us specifically, but with our producers and our support folks who will answer your questions. But then also, if you use the hashtag AskNASA, we'll get the questions to our astronaut, Zena Cardman, so she can answer them. And she's been doing a great job of answering all the questions leading up until this point.
Thanks, Daryl. It's been a blast to be with you. It's been a several hours long process, actually, just part of an even longer process to get astronauts to the International Space Station.
And we're just a little more than an hour away from liftoff now, as we look forward to a launch from Space Launch Complex 40 here at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. We have been monitoring the weather. One of the factors in today's launch, we have a good spacecraft, we have a good rocket,
Dragon,
and we have a good
you
pad.
Are go for section 5 of 4.100. Please report when you are go for launch.
And Freedom copies. We're go for section 5 and 4.01. I'm sorry, 4.100.
And there you heard communication between Commander Nick Hague and SpaceX Core, the Crew Operations and Resource Engineer. This is communication we're going to be hearing throughout this point leading up to liftoff.
That's right. Core, that voice from Mission Control in Hawthorne, is the one voice who is communicating directly with the crew today. You'll hear a few voices, but for the most part, we really like to keep those communications to a minimum. But our core, whose name is Shiva, just told the crew that we are continuing to progress towards launch. The next big milestone coming up will be the go, no-go decision to start loading propellant onto the Falcon 9 rocket.
And that's a big decision, Zena, because as you know, that is going to take the weather into account. And
SpaceX Freedom. section 5.4, we're go for launch.
SpaceX copies. Crew are ready for launch.
Some very exciting words to hear from Commander Nick Hague.
They are ready to go. Is the weather ready to go? We'll find that out in just a bit. They're going to make that decision, as you mentioned, about the weather before they start fueling the rocket, because once they do that, that locks it in at T-minus 35 minutes, and we're tanking the rocket at that point, and it's a pretty strong commitment at that point. As you can see on your screen, the radar is showing a storm that just moved offshore. That dumped some rain around the area, certainly on the launch pad. It didn't cause any harm. There were no problems with that. We can handle some rain on the rocket and on the launch pad. But what is more concerning is the stuff behind it. And from the satellite view, you can see that there is a plume of moisture that's developing in the southeastern part of the state of Florida and is moving its way upwards towards the northeast, directing over top of us. The idea, though, is, and what launch managers are hoping for, and certainly what the crew is hoping for, is that in between the rain, the lightning, and those storm cells are some clear patches of sky. All they need is a 10 nautical mile stretch around the launch pad, and they can launch into space. That's what we're hoping for. We got our fingers crossed.
Yes, we sure do. But weather or not, the crew themselves are ready. You see what I did there?
I
Thanks.
did. Good. Yes, and so you can see there that is the condensing of the warm Florida air from the ground side of the liquid oxygen. We haven't started loaded yet, but certainly getting the tanks ready to start loading that up. In the meantime, let's head back out to California and join SpaceX.
Thank you so much, Daryl. All types of human spaceflight missions are taking flight this year, including our recent Polaris Dawn mission. Polaris Dawn was the first of up to 3 missions in the Polaris program, which will demonstrate new technologies, conduct extensive research, and culminate in a flight of SpaceX's Starship with humans on board. After nearly 5 days in orbit, Dragon and the 4-person Polaris Dawn crew safely splashed down on September 15th off the coast of Dry Tortugas, Florida, completing the first spaceflight mission of the Polaris Dawn program. The Polaris Dawn crew, that you can see there on your screen, performed some firsts during their mission. Dragon and the crew reached over 1,400 kilometers altitude, the highest Earth orbit flown since the Apollo program, making Anna Menon and Sarah Gillis the current record holders for traveling farther from Earth than any other woman to date. The crew also participated in the first ever commercial EVA, or extravehicular activity, wearing SpaceX's newly developed EVA suits. They also conducted about 36 research studies and experiments from 31 partner institutions, including NASA. And in addition to all of that, they also tested Starlink laser-based communications in space.
That's right. As Atticus mentioned, NASA's Human Research Program flew 3 investigations on Polaris Dawn. The first study tested a compact, commercially available device that can collect astronauts' blood pressure, body temperature, ultrasounds, and other health information to see how easily it can gather data in space. The investigation will also assess whether the technology can help provide robust telemedicine in space. Another investigation sought to better understand the space-related motion sickness that's experienced by many astronauts through surveys and other health data. And the third study evaluated whether crews experience any injuries or discomfort from re-entry back to Earth, helping us at NASA design re-entry protocols that best protect crews. Additional human research was conducted on the Polaris Dawn crew members through the NASA-funded Translational Research Institute for Space Health, a cooperative agreement with multiple universities assessing sleep, eye health, immune systems, and more to help NASA build and maintain a robust archive of human health on everyone who flies in space.
Missions like Crew-9 and Polaris Dawn are important steps in building our future in space. Each mission delivers critical lessons and science that can inform long-duration spaceflight missions and help us continue on our journey to making life multi-planetary. Lessons learned also help guide development of SpaceX's Starship vehicle, which will be a key element in putting humans back on the moon and eventually on Mars. Before we head into our next interview, let's learn a bit more about what's happening with Starship down at SpaceX headquarters in Starbase, Texas. The first flight of Starship was in April of 2023, and the vehicle for the 5th flight is currently stacked and ready to fly. We made major strides with Flight 4 earlier this summer with a successful landing burn and a soft splashdown of our Super Heavy booster.
We also saw a Starship survive re-entry for the first time, with views live streamed from the vehicle via Starlink from space all the way through splashdown. We've got more flights planned that will start demonstrating some of the key technologies that will help make Starship fully and rapidly reusable. Now, the one I'm super excited about is catching that super heavy booster, which we'll be attempting on our next flight. If you've seen Starbase recently, you probably noticed that our teams have completed stacking the second launch tower at Starbase, which will be coming online early next year. Having 2 operational launch towers paired with ships and boosters rolling off the line in our new Star Factory will allow us to increase our flight cadence and test more rapidly. Our teams at Starbase have been hard at work on the continued Star Factory expansion. This 1 million square foot facility brings Starship and Super Heavy manufacturing closer together for more optimized production. And that will set the stage for us to rapidly produce hundreds of ships each year. And that's what it's going to take to build a self-sustaining city on Mars. Production lines are spinning up in Star Factory with multiple next-generation Starships currently in build as we get ready to ramp up our launch rate. We did recently static fire the Starship for Flight 6, producing some incredible video of its 6 Raptor engines in action. And we do have boosters already built for the next several flights.
And I'm really looking forward to seeing us catch the booster on the tower. That'll be a huge milestone. So I think we're all looking forward to that. Now, because Starship will serve as the lunar lander on Artemis 3, which is currently scheduled for the second half of 2026, it'll be the first to send humans to the lunar surface since Apollo. So we can expect to see SpaceX ramping up testing this year and next. The NASA and SpaceX teams have been working through a ton of additional hardware milestones outside of the flight tests, including the recent testing conducted with Starship's airlock and the Axiom spacesuits NASA astronauts will be wearing on future moonwalks.
One of the next major milestones in testing will be the first ever ship-to-ship propellant transfer, where 2 starships will rendezvous in space and transfer propellant from one to the other. Putting humans back on the moon is a major milestone. Our mission at SpaceX is to enable this type of exploration, and we can't wait to see this feature unfold. For more on what else is happening in the world of exploration, we'll hand it back over to Daryl and the crew in Florida.
Thank you very much, Atticus. T-minus 52 minutes and counting until liftoff. T-minus 52 minutes and counting until liftoff. As we've mentioned, today will be the first time we launch astronauts from Pad 40. For more on what was done to make that happen, we now have NASA's Megan Cruz live from a nearby launch viewing location here at Kennedy.
Hey, thanks, Daryl. And I'd also like to introduce Alec Jacobs. You see him right there next to me on the screen. He's the launch site integration lead with the Commercial Crew program. And we wanted Alec on today because, Alec, you were part of certifying Slick 40 for this inaugural crewed launch. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I've had the pleasure of being on the team that's been working on Slick 40 for the past 2 years to get it ready to launch Crew. 2 years ago is when NASA and SpaceX made the decision that we wanted to be able to have Slick 40 as a backup launch pad for crewed missions. So since then, the teams have been hard at work implementing all the crew systems. We've implemented the crew tower, crew access arm, the emergency egress systems, and all the Dragon systems needed to fuel and get ready the Dragon spacecraft for launching crewed from this pad. So it's been a great work over the last 2 years, and things have really come together in the last 6 weeks as we've focused our effort on Slick 40.
Yeah, and you guys had to pivot to Slick 40, right? Because Crew-9 was supposed to launch on 39A, but as we know, it's really busy here on the Space Coast.
Yes, it is really busy on the Space Coast, like you said. So a lot of launches going on from both 39A and 40 across the Space Coast. One of the ones we were looking at closely was NASA's Europa Clipper, which is actually planned to go off of 39A in October timeframe. So because of that and because of the move to the Crew-9 launch date, we were able to move to Slick 40 because of the crew capability we've been working on for the last 2 years. So really glad we put all that effort into that backup capability at Slick 40. And now it's all coming together today as we hope to launch here in just a little bit.
Yeah, so it sounds like agility, flexibility, that was really key to getting us to launch day today. Can you walk us through some of the other changes that maybe the program had to navigate? I mean, including, obviously, launching 2 members instead of 4.
Yeah, so a lot's happened in the last 6 weeks, and like you said, Megan, launching 2 crew members versus 4. Our teams have had to adjust to that, make sure we have the right training protocols and plans in place for the 2 versus 4 contingent. We're also able to let our first stage booster fly on its first mission out of Slick 40, get a flight on that booster, and now we're using it for the second time. And like you said, we're moving from 39A to Slick 40 for this launch, so a lot of flexibility among our teams and a lot of capability within our program and within NASA for our crew launch capability. So it's really great to see that we're able to accommodate all of these changes kind of at the last minute and still be able to get to launch today.
Yeah, really talented people that we work with here. So thank you so much, Alec. We're now just minutes away from polling the launch team to see if we're going to load propellant into the Falcon 9. So let's introduce you now to Ronnie Foreman, live at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California.
Thanks, Megan. I'm Ronnie Foreman, a senior commercial sales manager here at SpaceX, and I'm excited to be joining you all. We are coming up on just under 50 minutes to launch.
Dragon SpaceX for a weather update.
Call out there from our core about a weather update.
Freedom's with you.
Dragon, have good news that the most of the concerning weather that we saw from earlier has either cleared the pad or is trending to clear. We are still watching some precipitation, and we are expecting our next cross-check at around the T-minus 45-minute mark. We'll let you know, along with the go-no-go for a prop load, what that weather looks like. How copy?
Freedom copies. Outstanding news. Thank you.
Good news from our core there from Mission Control. We are coming up on just about 49 minutes to launch, and obviously our teams are carefully moving through the pre-flight process. A lot of preparations have brought us to this point, including a dry dress rehearsal and static fire on Tuesday. A dry dress rehearsal is a practice run before launch, where all of the steps are conducted except for the loading of propellants, which is why we call it dry. The integrated spacecraft and rocket are rolled out to the pad and raised vertically, and the crew and all of the support teams go through their steps exactly as they would on launch day to make sure that they're ready when we do go for launch. However, during a static fire test, which we also did earlier this week, the crew is not present. Propellants are loaded and the engines on the booster are fired for just a few seconds while the rocket is held down to the launch mount. The data from the static fire test is then reviewed and incorporated into NASA and SpaceX's decision to proceed with launch. All of that hard work brings us to today, and next up in our countdown, our launch director will check in with the team for readiness, both for prop load, as you heard earlier, and for launch. The Dragon team, as well as key NASA launch members, are currently at the Launch and Landing Control Center at SpaceX's Hangar X in Florida. The launch director will also check in with the Dragon mission director, or MD for short, and NASA launch manager to make sure they're ready to move forward. Right now, of course, our two-person crew is on board Dragon waiting to get that green light to stow the crew arm for launch and arm the launch escape system. Once our LD gives the go-ahead, we should get a good view of the access arm moving away from the spacecraft.
The range continues to be go for launch today, monitoring the clearance area surrounding our launch pad, as well as the air and sea space along the flight corridor. If you're joining us on the Space Coast, you know it's about 85 degrees out with just a bit of a breeze, and we're hoping you're going to have a great view of launch today. And of course, as you heard earlier, overall weather is trending in the right direction, and we are currently tracking a 35 to 40% chance of weather violation at our target liftoff time. Our teams will continue to keep an eye on the weather.
Propellant load and launch. For all operators in MCCX and Hangar X, both control rooms will go into lockdown at T-minus 45 minutes and will remain in that state until the launchscape system is disarmed. All operators are to remain at their console, maintain the sterile cockpit until MD confirms successful disarm of the launchscape system following orbit insertion or propellant offload. In the event of a scrub, stand by for hold and launchscape protocols. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD and they will approve aborting the countdown. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto-sequence and immediately proceed into the launch abort auto-sequence. In T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off and relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count. Operators advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules.
So with those instructions to our team, obviously we are moving forward, and as Shiva mentioned earlier,
we are tracking that T-minus 45 pre-fueling weather briefing. Our biggest watch item, as Daryl mentioned earlier, is a few lingering rain and storm systems, but we do think we're going to have a good shot at launch today. Our teams, of course, will be staffed around the clock in mission control, which you've got a great view of on your screen there, to monitor Dragon not just today, but throughout the entire mission, from liftoff to Crew-9's arrival at the space station, all the way through splashdown when the astronauts return home early next year. On console and mission control, there are 6 key positions. The mission director, or MD, is in charge of the room and tasked with making real-time decisions to ensure mission success. The person that you've heard talking to the astronauts is the Crew Operations and Resources Engineer, who you'll hear us refer to as the Core throughout the broadcast.
And launch control. At this time, you may proceed with arming the crew arm for movement.
Launch control copies. Arming now.
Good news that we're about to get that view of the crew arm moving away from Dragon. And we are moving ever closer to launch with just under 45 minutes to go.
Crew arm is armed for motion.
The 4 additional team members focused on vehicle systems in mission control include avionics, navigation and control, software, propulsion, life support, and communications with ground support teams. Apart from mission control...
Crew access arm retraction has started.
Confirmation there. Oh, and a great view on your screen that crew access arm is moving away from Dragon on Slick 40 for the first time. Now, apart from mission control, our Falcon 9 team is currently located at the LLCC at Hangar X in Florida. With just about 44 minutes until RT0 today, all the teams are settling in for final checkouts, propellant loading, and for launch. We are expecting propellant loading to begin just in about 9.5 minutes here. I'm sorry, 8.5 minutes here. So in the meantime, while we enjoy these great views, let's check back in with Daryl.
All right, thank you very much, Ronnie. As we've been watching the completion of that crew access arm retracting away from Dragon, big moment, big milestone. Talk to us about it, Zena.
Yeah, gosh, this is a really important milestone. So before we start actually loading propellant on the vehicle, we want to also arm the launch escape system so that if there were an issue with the rocket, even on the ground here on the pad, the crew have a safe way to escape and land safely. As Nick Hague has experienced firsthand, these systems are really, really
Dragon
important.
SpaceX, you are go for Section 6. Close visors and arm the launch escape system.
And Freedom copies. We're go, Section 6.
And there we go. We've got the go from Core in Mission Control Hawthorne for the crew to arm the launch escape system. The crew actually issue that command themselves from the display of Dragon.
SpaceX Freedom, visors are closed, and we are arming the launch escape system.
SpaceX copies.
All of these milestones moving towards the big one, which is tanking Falcon 9 with propellants, which would kick off at T-minus 35 minutes. An update on the weather from Launch Weather Officer Brian Cizik, who informs me that the probability of violation has now gone to 30%, reflecting a 70% go. The launch escape system is now verified armed, which means that the astronauts would, in the case of an emergency, exit off the top of the rocket through the launch escape system, carrying Dragon out to the Atlantic Ocean. But again, the weather is something that they are watching, but has been improving. We had some storm cells pass over the launch pad earlier, dumping a fair amount of rain on the area. But as you can see now, the sun, somewhat diffused through clouds, is shining brightly on Crew Dragon Freedom on top of a Falcon 9 rocket. And there's a lovely shot as well. We're getting some sunlight poking through the clouds. There is a storm system, another group of clouds and storms that's tracking on its way here. But according to Brian Cizik, it is not going to arrive before T0. And that's a great update and a great improvement in the weather scenario.
That's exactly right. Things are trending in a positive direction. I'm feeling optimistic. And of course, we want to make sure we have a good weather window before we give the final go to launch, but things are looking positive today.
That launch escape system, of course, there for an emergency. If there was a pad abort, Dragon would lift off either automatically, or if Nick Hague felt he needed to, he could, obviously you understand this as you're in training as a commander, could hit the abort and bring Dragon off the top of that rocket as well, taking it about 2.5 miles off the coast there to land in the ocean.
Yep, that's exactly right. Dragon and Falcon are very smart vehicles with excellent automation built in, and so that is the most likely scenario that would trigger a launch escape. But of course, the crew have the ability to trigger that manually using a handle that's just below the displays of the Dragon spacecraft, and actually certain ground operators can also trigger it remotely.
The launch escape system is powered by Super Draco engines capable of moving Dragon 1/2 mile in only 7.5 seconds, which is equivalent to a peak velocity of 436 miles per hour, something the astronauts would certainly feel.
Yes, absolutely. So you could expect in the case of a launch escape to experience some really high G loads. Those loads are going through the chest as opposed to vertically through your head, and so you would wind up feeling like someone extremely, extremely heavy, or 12 someone's extremely heavy, are sitting on your chest. This is something that we train for in centrifuges on the ground, and so, of course, you would be prepared if that needed to happen, but we're very grateful that these systems are there and available.
Did you ever chat with Nick about his emergency abort and what that felt like?
Absolutely, yeah, of course. This is something that
Very
Nick has
curious.
shared with
Right?
a lot of people. It's something that we are all curious about. It's a really unique thing. Not many people have experienced a abort like that. He said it was something that it happens before you really have a chance to think about it. The Soyuz, like Dragon, has a lot of automation built in, and so for his abort, the automated systems kicked in. But he said also your training really kicks in, and that's something that they train for in Soyuz as well. And so he felt well prepared to respond to that. All of the teams were in place, and he was collected safely after landing, brought back, and had the chance to launch again, actually not too much later. So this will be Nick Hague's second mission to the space station, but his third launch.
His third launch, indeed. As we watch now inside, looking at the Dragon Freedom, Nick Hague, Alexander Gorbanov in their seats, configured for launch, ready to go. Another interesting note about this flight, we were talking about the launch escape system, is this new capability that SpaceX has for emergency propulsive splashdown. It's the same system that we're talking about for launch escape system, but
For prop splash, as they call it, it's amazing that this is there just in case
there's a complete failure of the parachutes, where those Super Dracos would also fire, right?
That's right. Yeah, this is a really interesting capability. And of course, we have multiple parachutes on board the Dragon, and so this would be a backup to the backup in a
Tanks are
really
venting for the start of propellant load.
deep contingency case. But it's an amazing capability. The software has been built in, the plumbing has all been there from the start, but now we're actually flying with that software enabled, and of course we could unenable it if something changed in the configuration of that Dragon capsule.
Just another good backup to have as we encircle the launch complex there, Space Launch Complex 40. A historic first today, launching astronauts from this launch pad for the first time ever. T-minus 36 minutes and 20 seconds and counting. Just a little over a minute away from propellant load. A big milestone on our way to launching today. T0 is 1:17 and 21 seconds p.m. Eastern Time. It is an instantaneous window. We have to go at that second or we don't go at all. And that's all because of the timing necessary to catch up to the International Space Station. It's the most efficient time of this day to launch there, using the least amount of propellant that you would have to otherwise. And propellant is needed for a lot of things. Get the astronauts up, and of course we're bringing this booster back as well.
Absolutely. Although we would like to think we are in charge, it's actually physics is the boss today.
Absolutely. Let's listen in now as they start up propellant load.
Propellant load has started.
There we go.
There we go. This is a big milestone today. You can see that crew access arm is retracted from the Dragon. That is because we now have the launch escape system armed. Loading propellant is a dynamic operation.
Very dynamic operation when you start flowing, kerosene, highly refined kerosene, and then a little bit later, liquid oxygen.
That's right, yeah. So we'll be starting to load the liquid oxygen on stage 1.
T-minus 34 minutes, 20 seconds in counting until liftoff of Crew-9. We've got them seated inside the SpaceX Dragon at the top of this rocket. Spacecraft called Freedom. Alexander Gorbunov, the mission specialist. Nick Hague, the commander. The launch team is now preparing to continue the propellant load.
That's right, yeah, a little over a minute ago we heard the start of propellant load. We'll be starting with stage 1, then stage 2.
Skipping a little bit forward, once they launch, get into space, and arrive at the ISS, they've got some incredible science that they will be doing. Here's a closer look at how we're getting that science done.
The International Space Station isn't just a symbol. It's a powerhouse of cutting-edge science, constantly revealing secrets that defy Earth's limitations and drive us farther into the cosmos.
Our mission is research and science. We have experiments mounted on the outside of the station that are looking at Earth. We study our own bodies and how they react to space, to weightlessness, to radiation, and that helps not only us go on further in future missions, but also helps for medical research back home. And then we study lots of different things as well, like materials, combustion, all sorts of things that help us understand life back on Earth.
Yeah! Microgravity doesn't play by the rules. It flips them upside down, transforming how liquids flow, how flames burn, and unraveling biological mysteries before our eyes.
I saw some heart tissues beating in space, and it was incredible.
So, Tom, we see that top one beating. Looks like happy heart cells.
But we're not just along for the ride. We're explorers, diving headfirst into the challenge and harnessing the power of this unparalleled platform, just as we have been for decades. We're on a relentless quest for answers, seeking to understand the intricate workings of the human body in space and ensuring future crews stay safe on their daring journeys beyond Earth's orbit.
The human aspect of human space exploration is always going to be very important for decades to come.
And when it comes to technology, we're not waiting around. We're discovering new ways to grow crops in harsh environments and engineering innovations to tackle Earth's greatest challenges.
We have amazing technology that allows us to recycle water and create water for us to drink. It's delicious.
Microgravity isn't just a curiosity. It's a game changer in the fight against diseases back on Earth, paving the way for breakthroughs that benefit us all and enabling new economic opportunities in space.
Welcome, Axiom 3, on board the International Space Station.
From our vantage point more than 200 miles above Earth, we are not just spectators. We're gaining unprecedented insights into the world we call home, and we're sharing our findings openly. We're not just achieving results today. We're sparking inspiration in future generations of explorers and embracing the power of global collaboration as we reach for the stars.
What was your favorite experiment on the International Space Station?
Toby, great question. My favorite experiment was the one that I got to eat. It was us growing hatch chili peppers in our plant habitat.
Station Huntsville on 2, we have video in mode 1. Look at those chili peppers.
And as we soar through space at 17,500 miles per hour, each moment is a step closer to unlocking the mysteries of our Earth, our universe, and propelling our pioneering spirit even farther into space. So come along for the ride aboard the International Space Station.
Well, you heard a moving and saw a moving tribute to the science that's going on board the
Startup Stage 1 craft, helium loading.
And there you heard the call out that we're now cryo-loading liquid oxygen into the Falcon 9 rocket. Another great milestone passed. T-minus 29 minutes and counting. And here's now more about the crew that's going into space today. U.S. Space Force Colonel Nick Hague is your Crew-9 commander. He was selected by NASA as an astronaut in 2013. This will be his second space flight to the International Space Station. In 2018, as we've mentioned, he and his Soyuz crewmate experienced a catastrophic rocket booster malfunction after launch. They were forced to abort but landed safely 5 months later. 5 months later, I should say, Hague launched on another Soyuz and served as flight engineer for expeditions 59 and 60. He spent a total of 203 days in space and performed 3 spacewalks. The Kansas native is a test pilot and a distinguished graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. Nick spent 5 months in Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He voluntarily transferred from the United States Air Force to the U.S. Space Force in 2021 and is an active colonel. His wife, Katie, is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel, and they have 2 sons. This is mission specialist Alexander Gorbanov's first flight to space ever. He studied engineering with qualifications in spacecraft in upper stages from the Moscow Aviation Institute. Gorbanov graduated from the military department with a specialty in operation and repair of aircraft, helicopters, and aircraft engines. Before his cosmonaut selection in 2018, he worked as an engineer for a rocket space corporation and helped support cargo spacecraft launches from the Baikonur Cosmodrome.
Alexander and Nick are an excellent pair. They've trained together for a long time alongside Stephanie Wilson and myself.
Highly trained and ready to go. T-minus 27 minutes and counting until liftoff. Let's head back out to NASA's Megan Cruz, who's joined now by NASA Administrator Bill Nelson and Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy.
I am, and it's so great to have them here at Florida always. You know, Administrator, the weather seems to be improving, so we're hopefully poised to send another 2 astronauts to the International Space Station, where, of course, you know, we've had American astronauts there continuously for over 20 years. Talk to us about how international partnerships really help with American ingenuity in space.
Well, first of all, it shows that we are looking beyond our borders because we need our friends out there in other countries, and they have contributed greatly to this program. So, for example, on the big rocket that's going to go to the moon, it has the European support module from the European Space Agency. On our space station, there were originally about 15 international partners. Mm-hmm. And the number of countries that have used the space station is upwards of plus 40. So it is very much an international space program, and that's why it's called the International Space Station.
And actually, I'm going to ask you one more question, since we're talking about how the International Space Station is really a test bed for us as we return back to the moon, go farther to Mars. Let's talk about the Artemis II mission. Are there any updates for that as we look forward to sending 4 astronauts to orbit the moon?
Well, we are looking forward to the next flight, Artemis II. The crew has been named. Reed Wiseman is the commander. They're going to do everything in preparation for the 3rd Artemis, which will be the one that will go into lunar orbit, hook up with a SpaceX lander, and we will have then the first woman and the next man will walk on the moon.
Yeah, something exciting to look forward to. Now, Deputy Administrator, let's go back and talk about Crew-9 now. So, you know, we're launching with 2 empty seats. That's so NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams can return with Nick and Alexander early next year. What have Butch and Sunny been able to accomplish on the ISS since they got there in June?
Well, the good news is having 2 extra sets of hands means more than 80 hours a week of extra work that can go into critical science, but also maintaining the station. So they have really contributed. Crew time is really precious on orbit. It feels like there's never enough. But I would like to highlight a couple of experiments that they have been working on that I think are exciting, both because of how they impact future spaceflight, but also people here on Earth. So the plant management, a water management experiment, which is testing different techniques for transporting water to plants. Now, in space, in microgravity, water doesn't flow the same way without gravity to take care of it. But what's interesting is not only will that help us when we go to the moon and we go on to Mars, the ability to grow our own plants, but it also affects hydroponic systems here on Earth. The other experiment that I think is really significant is looking at taking some tissue cultures of the bone marrow that creates platelets, right? Very important in our blood system. And they're going to grow them in cultures. And part of that is to look at blood clotting and how those cells develop and how it might work in space.
Right.
But it also is going to help us understand blood clots better here in gravity by being able to compare the two.
I know,
so they are
great
doing
experiments.
very significant science.
Yeah, it's always so great to have veteran astronauts there as well. All right, so let's head back over now to our commentators in Hawthorne, California. Thank you both.
Thank you, Megan. As we continue to count down, let's take a closer look at the vehicles that will be taking Crew-9 to the International Space Station today. Falcon 9 is a 2-stage rocket developed and manufactured by SpaceX, known for its safe, reliable, and cost-effective access to space. It's also the first and currently the only orbital-class rocket capable of reflight. Sitting at the top of Falcon 9, Dragon and its trunk stand over 26 feet tall. There are 2 windows on the spacecraft, plus 1 under the nose cone. The nose cone opens shortly after launch to expose the forward bulkhead thrusters and docking mechanism that will connect to the space station. Dragon's trunk holds solar cells, which power Dragon while it's in free flight. The trunk can also carry unpressurized cargo.
Dragon has 16 Draco thrusters that can be used in space to help navigate the spacecraft to its destination, each providing 90 pounds of force. That doesn't include the 8 Super Draco thrusters used for an abort, which are no longer active once the crew is in orbit.
Dragon has played a significant role in advancing our future in space by safely transporting crew to and from the space station. There's currently 4 Dragon spacecraft supporting human spaceflight missions that have docked to the station, and those are Endeavour, Resilience, Endurance, and Freedom. Designed to be the safest spacecraft ever flown, Dragon is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers to and from Earth orbit and beyond.
Crew-9 is SpaceX's 15th human spaceflight mission since 2020, when Dragon became the first private spacecraft to take humans to the International Space Station. Dragon has completed over 47 launches and flown 54 astronauts representing 14 countries. Throughout all of those missions, Dragon has helped support more than 1,000 experiments. Altogether, the reusable Dragon spacecraft have completed 8 human spaceflight missions on behalf of NASA and visited the station 42 times under NASA's commercial resupply and commercial crew programs.
And through all of that, Dragon has proven to be quite a versatile spacecraft. It can autonomously dock to the space station when outfitted with the ISS docking adapter, as it is for today's flight. When not going to the space station and in free flyer mode, the docking adapter can be swapped out for a cupola. Then, of course, you have our newest option, the Skywalker hardware, to support extravehicular activities, which the crew just used for the first time during Polaris Dawn. Continuing down the vehicle, we have the second stage. The second stage is powered by a single Merlin vacuum or MVAC engine, and this engine is optimized to perform in the vacuum of space. After stage separation, the MVAC will ignite and carry Dragon to its target orbit. The Falcon 9's first and second stages are connected by the black interstage, which houses the MVAC engine and the systems that decouple the 2 stages during stage separation. Below that, of course, is the first stage, which is powered by 9 Merlin engines. These 9 Merlin engines provide the initial thrust to lift Falcon 9 off the pad and clearing the tower through the lower, thicker parts of the Earth's atmosphere. Each of these 9 Merlin 1D engines delivers about 190,000 pounds of thrust at sea level, and that gives Falcon 9 a combined 1.7 million pounds of thrust.
After stage separation, stage 1 will return to Earth for recovery and reuse on a future mission using a combination of the Merlin sea level engines and the 4 titanium grid fins located near the top of the booster, which will guide it during its reentry and landing. The Falcon 9 first stage is also equipped with 4 landing legs that deploy just before landing to allow for a vertical touchdown on either a drone ship or a landing pad. And today we'll be attempting to land this booster at landing zone 1 back at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. The second stage will power Dragon into its initial low Earth orbit before separating, leaving Dragon to continue its journey to the space station using its own thrusters. About 40 seconds after separation, Dragon's nose cone deploy sequence will begin, exposing the guidance navigation controls that help Dragon autonomously fly to the space station.
With T0 coming up in just under 20 minutes, our teams at the Cape are doing a series of system checks to ensure Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready for flight. So for now, let's check in with Ronnie for a quick status update.
Thanks, Atticus. We are still looking good for an on-time launch just under 20 minutes from now. Both Dragon and Falcon 9 continue to be healthy. As we continue to listen and watch the countdown, our teams are prepping the vehicle for flight. Propellant loading of both RP1 and liquid oxygen began at T-minus 35 minutes. We also heard the call out that the launch escape system is now armed. The launch escape system is designed to propel Dragon away from Falcon 9 in the event of an emergency during launch. The range, which is monitoring the keep-out zones, among other key flight requirements, also continues to report no issues, and they are go to support today's launch. As you heard earlier, weather is also looking good, and we are still tracking roughly a 30% chance of violation at our target liftoff time. But we are optimistic that we're going to have good conditions at that T0. Now, as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch window driven by our planned rendezvous point, the point at which Dragon and station will meet in orbit. The space station is currently orbiting the Earth at more than 17,000 miles per hour, and Dragon needs to catch up to it. That means we have to deliver Dragon to the correct orbit by timing its trajectory relative to the orbiting laboratory so that they are in the same place in space at the same time. A precise liftoff time is crucial for hitting that rendezvous point. Of course, that means that at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we'll have to stand down and target our backup opportunity, which is tomorrow at 12:54 Eastern Time. Now, with all systems go, I'm going to turn it over to Nilofer for a status update from Houston.
And thank you, Ronnie. Back here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, teams are continuing to work around the clock to monitor activities aboard the orbital outpost. Leading the team inside the room is Flight Director Nicole McElroy. The team in Mission Control Houston, the team in Hawthorne, and the astronauts aboard the space station will track the autonomous docking of Dragon Freedom on Sunday when they enter joint operations. This will happen when the spacecraft enters the approach ellipsoid, the invisible boundary that helps us monitor arriving and departing spacecraft. Once docked, Dragon Freedom's crew will perform a series of leak checks, then work to open the spacecraft's hatch before floating into the station to begin their 5-month stay. We anticipate that the hatch will be opened about an hour and a half after docking. When they enter the orbital outpost, Crew-9 will be greeted by the rest of their Expedition 72 crew and will come together for opening remarks. The anticipation for launch continues here in Mission Control. How's it looking on the Space Coast, Daryl?
Well, we're looking pretty good, Nilofer, and thank you very much. Weather improving here at the Kennedy Space Center. If you're just joining us, we are 16 minutes and 37 seconds away from the launch of the 9th astronaut rotation mission to the International Space Station under NASA's commercial.
Stage 2 LOX load has started.
And there you heard, Stage 2 LOX load has begun, the final loading of propellants into the Falcon 9 rocket. Commander Nick Hague and Mission Specialist Alexander Gorbunov are strapped into their seats inside Dragon Freedom. As you can see right there, the Falcon 9 rocket fueling operation well underway. The launch escape system is armed, and that means Dragon is prepared to launch itself away from the Falcon 9 in case of an emergency. So far, operations look and sound as expected, and we are counting down to liftoff at 1:17 and 21 seconds p.m. Eastern Time. And I want to welcome in a special guest here on set now. NASA astronaut Stephanie Wilson is here, joining us alongside side, Zena Cardman, both of you NASA astronauts. It is so good to have you both here. You both trained for Crew-9. This is where you probably expected to be on this day, but you have accepted this role of supporting your friends for launch. And as they get ready to launch with 15 minutes left to go, Stephanie, question for you. What is the mindset of the crew that you trained with? You've flown into space 3 times on the space shuttle. What's the mindset of the crew right now?
Well, thank you, Daryl, and thank you, Zena, for having me join you today. And yes, both Zena and I have trained for 1.5 years with Nick and Alex. They have trained hard. They are well prepared. In this moment where they are strapped inside the vehicle with just the 2 of them, they are reviewing procedures. They have trained for this moment. They are ready to execute the mission. They are, of course, looking forward to the work that's ahead of them on the International Space Station. Perhaps a little bit sad to be leaving family and friends, but they'll be talking to them soon once they have docked to the International Space Station. But it's a moment to review all of the hard work that has gone into this moment in the preparation and to be ready to execute the mission, which they will do very well.
Speaking of hard work, you both trained for Crew-9 for 1.5 years. And so from a human level, we know you are professional astronauts. Your seats were needed for Butch and Sunny to bring them back. What was it like for you personally when you learned that you wouldn't be flying today, but you would be flying some other time, but not today?
Yeah, gosh, Daryl, I think I felt a lot of emotion when I saw Stephanie walking through the door there. It's bittersweet, but it's a really beautiful thing. I think any launch is a testament to the power of collaboration, and this launch maybe even more so than usual. I think from my perspective, it's a privilege and a choice to take part in something that's larger than yourself, and that's a choice that I make today and the next day and the next day. So in this moment, it's feeling exciting, it's feeling bittersweet, but for the most part, I'm feeling a lot of joy and pride in our space program, and so excited for our crew members, especially Alexander. This is his first launch to space. Nick, this will be his second mission to the International Space Station. It's going to be a beautiful day. And I think
for you, Steph?
Yes, very, very similar. I think that we all train together. Adaptability and flexibility is key as we look across our corps. You know, we all train for various roles, and we select people that can serve in various roles and can be seamlessly thrown into different roles. And excited for them. We're always excited for our colleagues to have an opportunity to launch into space. Of course, we wish we could be with them. We have trained with them for this time. We, of course, want to be together. We have built friendship and camaraderie and learned for the roles for the Crew Dragon and for the International Space Station. But I'm very excited for them, looking forward to hearing their stories from space and for seeing them launch.
And that launch just 12 minutes away, a little over 12.5 minutes away, the Falcon 9 rocket. Well, this is a booster that can be reused more than a few times with minimal maintenance. At the time that this launch happens, it will be flying over the International Space Station, will be flying 260 statute miles over northeast Bulgaria. Crew-9 will then spend the next 28 hours or so chasing down the International Space Station for a rendezvous currently targeted for September 29th at 5:30 p.m. And we'll have live coverage on NASA TV of docking, which will arrive when it does dock, about 2 hours before. And so I want to thank Stephanie Wilson for coming in and joining us. We really appreciate your time and being here. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. As we continue to count down, T-minus 11 minutes and 42 seconds and counting, getting close to terminal count. We want to commend both Stephanie Wilson and Zena Cardman for their professionalism and for their support of their fellow crew members and friends who are going up today.
That's absolutely right, Daryl. It's an exciting day to be here, and although 50% of us are staying on the ground this morning, we are part of this mission, this Crew-9 mission, and we're so proud to be part of the team that got this Dragon Freedom, Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov, ready for flight today. Thinking about another minute or so, we'll hear the next expected call that the crew displays are configured for launch. We'll hopefully hear at that point some great words from our commander.
That's right. Nick Hague is going to have some words for us, so we're going to tune into that. And you and I will join Stephanie outside and watch your friends launch to space. In the meantime, let's send it out to SpaceX in California.
Dragon, SpaceX. Confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
So good news there from Mission Control. And our next major countdown event will be around the...
And SpaceX Freedom. We can confirm our displays are configured for launch. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the entire team around the world for your hard work and dedication to get us to this point. Alex and I are ready and honored to represent you and everyone back on Earth. A huge thanks to our families and friends for your unwavering support, and to Crew-9, unbreakable. We go together.
SpaceX copies. You've proven you're ready, Dragon, and we're looking forward to seeing a full capsule at splashdown.
Really exciting commentary there from Commander Nick Hague. And with that, we are just about 9.5 minutes to launch. And right now, the Falcon 9 launch commit criteria are being checked by our onboard computers. Those launch commit criteria are specific thresholds and data that tell us that the rocket is healthy. There are many systems in place to ensure that the rocket and crew are both safe leading up to liftoff and during flight. And now that we're approaching terminal count, our teams are performing those final checks.
Just coming up on 9 minutes before launch right now, we just heard from Commander Nick Hague. He and Alexander Gorbanov are suited. They are seated in Dragon Freedom there, as you can see on the screen. We have teams here at Mission Control Hawthorne monitoring the vehicle, both Dragon and Falcon 9. Meanwhile, in Houston, as we heard from Nilifer, some of those teams in console positions are keeping tabs on the space station, its reboost capabilities, making sure everything is looking good for Dragon's arrival tomorrow. We're looking at about a 9-minute ride to orbit today, and that's the point that the second stage will cut off. After that, Dragon and the second stage will continue to coast for another few minutes, and then they will separate. You'll be hearing some performance calls as we get into this final countdown, and then after liftoff. These are SpaceX flight controllers reporting on trajectory, speed, booster performance, and other key milestones. And there are also some other calls you'll hear the crew make after liftoff. The crew will report out on a few number and letter combinations, and these mark different abort zones through the flight up the eastern seaboard. The first two are 1A and 1B, and these are available when the first stage is firing. The next are 2A through 2E. Those will come into play once the second stage kicks in, but we will only hear the call for 2A. Diverting a little bit from the other naming system, you will also hear the call Shannon, and that refers to Shannon, Ireland. That means the crew could target off the coast of Ireland if they needed to abort later in the second stage burn. Again, you'll hear these calls throughout the flight uphill, along with the key performance callouts from the guidance, navigation, and control officer, as well as the propulsion lead.
One of the next callouts we're listening for in our countdown is the announcement that Stage 1 engine chill has started, which is one of the key processes that prepares the engines on board our first stage for flight. Right now, propellant in the tanks is isolated from the engines, but at T-minus 7 minutes, we'll open the engine pre-valves and start passing just a trickle of liquid oxygen through the Merlin engine pumps, chilling those engines for the start sequence.
Stage 1 engine chill has started.
Confirmation there that engine chill has started. Now, we do this because the super chilled and densified liquid oxygen on board is really, really cold. So we use the process to bring that engine hardware down to a cooler temperature before flowing all of the LOX and propellant into it during flight. At liftoff, Falcon 9 is consuming 700 gallons of fuel per second. So engine chill helps us to prevent thermal shock and ensures nominal engine performance. The next thing we're listening in for is the confirmation that RP1 load has been completed on board Stage 1.
RP1 is that densified kerosene or rocket fuel that propels the crew into orbit. All of that RP1 is we are waiting to hear that it is fully loaded onto the rocket, and the second stage loading was completed earlier. So we're still loading liquid oxygen as well on the first and second stages.
Stage 1 fuel load is complete.
Confirmation right on time that RP1, the densified kerosene loading, is now complete. Again, still loading liquid oxygen on the first and second stages. We need this to combine with the densified kerosene. That RP1 liquid propellant needs an oxidizer to combine with in order to ignite. Coming up next at the 5-minute mark, we'll hear the call for Dragon to configure for terminal count and then transition over to internal power. And then we'll hear the propellant tanks on Falcon 9 are getting ready to pressurize, which means they'll have some additional rigidity and structural support for the rocket as we get ready for the strong back to retract. The strong back provides access to Falcon 9's fueling lines and umbilicals for both prop load and the different gases being loaded on board. The clamp arms will open and it'll move just a couple of degrees at first, and then we will see it swing open completely at the moment of liftoff. We'll continue to check through a couple more fueling milestones, including one around the 2-minute mark before flight, where we'll hear liquid oxygen loading is complete on the second stage.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
Dragon in configure for terminal count. Now under 5 minutes to launch, we are in terminal count, meaning the Dragon onboard computers take control of the spacecraft. Again, we are still watching first stage as its liquid oxygen loading continues. That'll be complete around 3 minutes, followed by completion of second stage liquid oxygen loading about 1 minute later.
Strong back retract has started.
Just heard that call out from Mission Control that strong back retract has started, and if we keep a close eye on the screen, there we go, just coming out of those clouds of liquid oxygen, we got to see those clamp arms opening up around stage 2. What's going to happen now is that our strong back will recline just about 2 degrees away from the vehicle. But the TE will throw back all the way to 45 degrees at liftoff, clearing the way for Falcon 9 to leave the pad.
As Leah mentioned, that strong back does route the vehicle's fluid and telemetry lines all the way up to the rocket and our spacecraft today. Good views of the strong back moving away from Falcon 9 and Dragon there on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. With that, we are just about 30 seconds away from LOX load completion on board the first stage.
As Ronnie mentioned, standing by just about 20 seconds from now. We're expecting to hear the liquid oxygen loading will finish. Again, this is required to combine with that RP1, the densified kerosene, to give us the chemical composition we need to propel the rocket into space. All of these white clouds of vapor you see on your screen are normal. We will continue to see them build as we get closer to launch, and that's due to this liquid oxygen. It's super chilled, so some of that does boil off in the hot Florida air.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
There's confirmation right on time.
Dragon in terminal count and on internal power.
That we both have LOX load complete on the stage 1 and that Dragon is on internal power. We are expecting LOX loading to last for just about another 30 seconds on board stage 2. And then we should see a vent down of the TE LOX lines. That's going to produce another one of those large white clouds moving away from the vehicle. Again, as Leah just mentioned, that is totally normal and happens when that cooler liquid oxygen that's venting off the surface of the tanks comes into contact with that humid Florida air along the Space Coast.
We're standing by now for stage 2 liquid oxygen loading to be complete.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
Dragon in auto idle.
With confirmation of that liquid oxygen load complete, gas closeout has...
Gas closeout has started. Expect loud venting.
Right on time, that gas closeout has begun. So we are now isolating all the feed lines for the different gas systems from the Falcon 9 rocket. Those will then get vented overboard through the umbilicals and the strong back itself. And you can actually hear that venting right now. Now, something else you'll see is our sound suppression technique. Our rockets are super loud, and that sound can impart pressure loads back on the rocket itself. So just before liftoff, you'll see a ton of water dumping onto the pad. This absorbs and prevents the sound from hitting the structure and reverberating back onto the rocket, which could cause
FTS is
damage.
armed. Falcon 9 is in startup and is now controlling.
Dragon in countdown.
Now that we are in countdown, the flight computer on Dragon will switch to countdown mode. And we've also heard the flight
Freedom,
termination
SpaceX.
system is armed.
Go for launch.
Freedom is go for launch.
That's our final go for launch. SpaceX reporting go and the crew reporting
T-minus
go.
30 seconds.
Standing by for the first
T-minus
launch of
10,
humans
9,
from Space Launch
8,
Complex 40.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Engine full power. And liftoff. Crew-9. Go SpaceX. Go Falcon. Go NASA.
Liftoff of Crew-9 now soaring to the International Space Station.
Stage 1 Alpha.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Copy 1 Alpha.
Those 9 Merlin engines now providing 1.7 million pounds of thrust, propelling Falcon 9 and Crew-9 and continuing to get good calls from teams here on the ground.
Of course, these incredible views mean we are just a little bit past 30 minutes or 30 seconds into our 9th rotational crew mission.
Power telemetry nominal.
On board Dragon and Falcon 9 with good callouts from mission control that everything is looking good. With that, stage 1 is throttling down to pass through max Q, which is the period of maximum dynamic pressure on Falcon 9 during ascent.
Max Q.
Confirmation of max Q.
Vehicle is supersonic.
And that Falcon 9 is now traveling faster than the speed of sound.
Stage 1 throttle up.
Stage 1 Bravo.
Copy 1 Bravo.
That call out for 1 Bravo means we're in the second and final abort mode for the first stage and continuing to get good performance.
MVAC chill is underway.
The crew is pulling just over 2 Gs at this point. Next up, we heard the engine chill on the second stage MVAC engine has begun, and then we will have MECO, or main engine cutoff, where the 9 engines on the first stage will cut off ahead of the first and the second stages, and then will separate from one another. Then that single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite and continue to carry Crew-9 to orbit while the first stage begins its journey back to Earth. Two minutes in, and the crew is now traveling over 2,600 miles per hour.
Stage 1 is throttling down.
Confirmation there from mission control that stage 1 is throttling down as we prepare for main engine cutoff, followed shortly thereafter by stage separation and second engine start 1. You did hear mission control out that we are chilling our... There's confirmation of MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
Stage 2 Alpha.
MVAC ignition.
Copy 2 Alpha.
With that, we have had confirmation of MECO, stage SEP, and the ignition of our MVAC engine on board stage 2. Our next major milestone is going to be the beginning of stage 1 boost back burn, which is expected in just a couple of seconds here. Of course, if you are just joining us, you've got views of our first stage on the left-hand side of your screen and of MVAC burning with our Crew-9 astronauts aboard up in space on the right-hand side of your screen.
Now we are coming up on 3 minutes and 20 seconds since liftoff today, traveling over 4,000 miles per hour and 76 miles downrange.
As our first stage makes its way back to Earth, we are tracking a landing attempt today at Landing Zone 1, not too far from where we lifted off in Cape Canaveral, Florida.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Confirmation there that both vehicles
Copy, nominal trajectory.
are on nominal trajectories. Everything is looking good.
And we're getting good performance on that single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. The crew's G-load dips right now. We are going to prepare to hit the separation event. Right now they're about 1 G, which is about what we're used to experiencing on Earth. Crew's traveling almost 5,000 miles per hour now and 105 miles in altitude.
As we await the entry burn for our first stage, you are getting great views of it on the left-hand side of your screen. You can also see 2 of our titanium grid fins, which are the primary mechanical structures.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Confirmation there from Mission Control that everything is still looking good.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
Now, as I mentioned, those grid fins are the primary mechanical structures that we use to steer the booster back toward its landing zone, which today is LZ1 at Cape Canaveral. Just as kind of a quick point of reference, those grid fins are about 4 by 5 feet, so roughly the size of a coffee table. Getting our first tracking shots of the booster on its way back to Earth. Again, we are tracking the first stage on the left-hand side of your screen and MVAC up in space on the right.
And we do continue to hear good calls for that second stage. Again, we will see this continue to fire until close to 9 minutes into the flight, now at 5 minutes and 45 seconds since liftoff today. This is accelerating Dragon to more than 17,000.
SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
More good news.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
This second stage is bringing Dragon to more than 17,000 miles per hour. That puts our crew in orbit. And the single Merlin vacuum engine can produce over 220,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space.
Stage 1 does perform 3 burns on its way back to Earth. The first is the boost back burn, followed shortly thereafter by the entry burn. The entry burn is used by Falcon 9 to slow the vehicle down before it reaches the denser parts of the Earth's atmosphere.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Nominal trajectory is there from Mission Control.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
That entry burn is, of course, followed by the landing burn, during which time we'll light 3 of the Merlin engines on board the first stage. And we expect to see that landing burn just about a minute before we expect Dragon to be inserted into orbit. So we have 2 very exciting phases of flight, both for our first stage and our Crew-9 astronauts happening here at the same time.
Stage 2, FTX has based.
Saw a great touchdown of stage 1 there just a second ago. And now, of course, we are continuing to follow our Crew-9 astronauts on their way to space.
And we continue to get good calls for this second stage, that Merlin vacuum engine continuing to fire and propel our crew, now moving over 12,600 miles per hour and 611 miles downrange. Just over 8 minutes since liftoff today, so we are expecting to see this continue to fire until just about the 9-minute mark, at which point this engine will cut off. And of course, Dragon will coast for a few minutes, still attached to the second stage.
Shannon.
That call.
Copy, Shannon.
That call is for Shannon, Ireland. That would be the abort zone if we were to abort at this point in the flight. However, we are continuing to hear good calls about Dragon's performance.
MVAC shutdown.
Confirmation of the Merlin vacuum engine shutting down.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal orbit insertion.
Good news there from
And Freedom
Mission,
copies nominal orbital insertion.
from Mission Control and our crew that we have had nominal
Dragon,
orbit insertion.
SpaceX, launch escape system disarmed.
Freedom copies LES disarmed.
In 9 quick minutes, we now have 2 new crew members on their way to the International Space Station, having taken off from Space Launch Complex 40. The crew now being in a good or expected orbit. We'll continue to coast for these few minutes, and then we get our first views inside the capsule of our 2 crew members, Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov. They are just continuing to stay in their suits and in their seats during this dynamic portion of the flight. We're going to continue to coast for a few minutes after this second stage engine cutoff. This allows the rates and motion from that long burn to settle out. There are some small reaction thrusters on the upper stage the upper part of the second stage that can be used to counteract any residual motion. That basically makes sure we're in a stable coast before Dragon separates from Falcon, and that'll happen about 12 minutes into the flight. So about a minute and a half from now, we expect to see Dragon actually separating from the second stage. Again, we did hear the crew has been successfully inserted into a good orbit. And again, this is them now in microgravity, one of them, Alexander Gorbanov, for the very first time.
So as Leah mentioned, we are now just a few minutes away from the separation of Dragon from stage 2, during which time a number of activation checkouts occur. Automatically, first we're going to be checking out 12 of the Draco maneuvering thrusters, all around the service section of the Dragon spacecraft. We're also, of course, going to get ready for that nose cone opening, which will allow Dragon to dock with the International Space Station about 28 hours from now. The nose cone stays closed for the flight uphill to help protect against all of the guidance, navigation, and control sensors and Dragon's docking adapter. It's also covering 4 of our Draco thrusters that will be used for the majority of different phasing burns required as Dragon chases down the space station. We are currently standing by for that separation, which could happen anytime in the next couple of minutes.
Currently, you can see the crew is just relaxing in their seats. They are definitely vigilant, though. They are able to monitor those crew displays in front of them, keep up with what's going on in the mission. They could take control if they needed to. However, it's been a seamless ride to space today.
Good views there, looking up into Dragon's trunk, looking at the heat shield on the bottom of Dragon that Crew-9 will use when it returns home early next year.
Dragon, SpaceX, Dragon separation confirmed.
There.
And Freedom copies good separation.
There you heard from Mission Control. Both
Dragon, Chief Engineer on Countdown 1. Nick, Alex, on behalf of the entire team, we thank you for flying with Falcon 9 today and wish you a great mission.
And Freedom, this is Launch Director on Countdown. On behalf of the entire SpaceX Launch and Recovery team, I'd like to extend our congratulations to the entire Crew-9 team. Zena, Stephanie, Nick, Alex, Butch, and Sunny. It's an honor to be a part of this mission with all of you. I'd also like to give a shout out to the Falcon 9 Crew-9 combo. The best bundle in the league, baby. Godspeed, Crew-9.
Couldn't say it any better. Thank you, guys. You know, we had the opportunity to meet so many people that were involved with the Falcon 9, and along the way was a sweet ride. I'm pretty sure my youngest son would say it was Sigma. Alex has got a few words to add as well.
All the agencies that made this launch possible. The Roscosmos, NASA, Big SpaceX, and thank you to my family and friends for their support. And also, I'd like to express my gratitude to the hundreds of thousands of people around the world who are involved in the development of space technologies and to move humanity forward. Today's launch is also their accomplishment. Хочу сказать спасибо Роскосмосу, НАСА совместно со SpaceX за успешный запуск человека на орбиту, за очередной успешный запуск, и также благодарить родных и близких за поддержку. Спасибо.
Incredible words from our commander and great views of Dragon up in orbit on your screen right now.
It's been about 14 minutes and 30 seconds since coming up on 15 minutes now since liftoff today. You got a quick look inside the capsule.
Dragon SpaceX, we had a nominal dehumidifier activation and service section Draco checkouts. Nose cone deploy is in progress.
And Freedom copies all. Thank you.
Confirmation there that our nose cone deploy is underway. That means that the 6 hooks that hold the nose cone in place during launch and the ascent portions of flight have begun to retract. That will allow the nose cone to start to swing open and deploy. That will uncover a number of critical systems for the flight up to the space station, including the forward bulkhead thrusters and the docking hatch. Incredible views from our crew up in space on your screen right now, but I'm sure it's nothing compared to the view out of Dragon's window as they make their way to the space station.
I can only imagine. And that journey to the space station will take about 28 hours, so they won't arrive until tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, they will have the opportunity to get out of their suits, to get out of their seats as well, and kind of just enjoy the ride. They're going to shift into some off-duty time. That allows them to prepare any food that they would want to. That allows them to maybe even call down to the ground. They will also obviously get some sleep before a really big day tomorrow, monitoring the arrival and docking to the International Space Station. Of course, we're going to cover all of that live. I'm really looking forward to seeing 2 more crew members float into the orbiting laboratory. And if you're just joining us, we did lift off now at 16 minutes and 29 seconds ago. That was right on time at 1:17 p.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex 40 down at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. We have 2 members on board Dragon today. That's NASA astronaut Nick Hague, who's serving as the commander, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov, who's making his very first flight to space. Once they arrive at the International Space Station tomorrow afternoon, they will be joining 9 other crew members on orbit. They'll be up there for about a week. A week is probably the best guess, until the Crew-8 team, it is time for that crew to come home. Of course, they launched about 7 months ago at this point, and they will undock after they have completed a handover period with the Crew-9 crew, bringing them up to speed on everything that they've been working on for the last 7 months in orbit. So once they depart, we'll be back down to our typical approximately 7 people living and working aboard the International Space Station.
We are getting really spectacular views from up in space today. Shot there of our MVAC engine. We did get confirmation several minutes ago of SES-1.
And we know that nose cone opening is underway as well. Those are a series of hooks and latches that allow the nose cone to open. And that nose cone is closed during launch to protect the docking hatch, to protect 4 bulkhead thrusters that we will use for some of the larger burns that help us get to the International Space Station.
One of the other things we're doing right now is going ahead and opening the ECLSS system, which stands for the Environmental Control and Life Support System, which will be activated inside of Dragon. As Leah mentioned earlier, soon our crew will be able to get their visors open and get out of their spacesuits and settle in for that 28-hour ride to the International Space Station. Good views there of the opening of Dragon's nose cone on the left-hand side of your screen.
And coming up on 19 minutes since liftoff today, the crew, again, had a good orbital insertion, and that actually puts 14 people currently in low Earth orbit. That includes those living on the International Space Station right now, as well as those living on the Chinese space station. So a total of 14 humans are now not off the planet, but rather orbiting around it.
More good views from our Dragon nose cone on the left-hand side of your screen. As it very gradually swings open, obviously in space, everything we do has an equal and opposite reaction, so slow and steady really wins the race here.
Again, now 20 minutes since liftoff today. Dragon is flying free from the second stage, and it looks like they're about to enter an orbital nighttime. So now that they're at orbital velocity, that's 17,500 miles per hour, they are going to see 16 sunrises and sunsets a day. Again, it was an on-time liftoff at 1:17 p.m. Eastern Time from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, and a clean ride uphill.
We've had some good communication from Mission Control up to our Crew-9 astronauts already today. One of the things you may hear every time we communicate with the crew is a slight beep beforehand. That's called a Quindar tone, and actually dates all the way back to the early days of human spaceflight, and is effectively a radio signal indicating that we're communicating between
the crew in orbit and our mission control team on the ground.
We now have views back inside the capsule.
Dragon SpaceX, we had a nominal nose cone opening. We do have just about 3 minutes here left in the ground station pass, if you've got any fluffy stowaways you'd like to introduce.
And Freedom copies, good Draco checkout, good nose cone opening. And I just so happen to have a furry friend with me. Yeah, SpaceX Freedom. So yeah, I've got a little Falcon here. I love the package of Falcon 9, Crew-9. Yeah, we've got a Falcon on board with us. This one's a multi-flyer though. Was on my first flight with Alexei and I, and with Alexei and I and Christina, and now me and Alex. So say hello to Aurora.
And we see your Dragon. Actually, a good view right now because we're looking at the display cam. And Dragon delayed call, but nominal TCS reconfiguration as well as port bulkhead Draco checkouts.
And Freedom copies, good TCS, good Draco checkouts.
Spectacular views of our Crew-9 astronauts and zero-G indicator up in orbit. Human spaceflight has come so far in the last 5 years with Dragon. Since Demo 2 in May of 2020, SpaceX's Dragon fleet has launched a total of 54 crew members to space. 34 on behalf of NASA and their partners, and 20 commercial astronauts, including the first 2 all-civilian missions to space and the first 3 all-private passenger missions to the International Space Station.
In addition to flying people, excuse me, SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft also enables researchers the opportunity to fly critical science to orbit. And that's just like what we saw with the 3 investigations that NASA's Human Research Program flew on Polaris Dawn. So far, SpaceX and Dragon have carried over 1,000 research experiments to and from low Earth orbit, both to the International Space Station and on our free flyer missions as well.
From DNA sequencing to 3D printing, studies enabled by Dragon and the International Space Station test a variety of technologies, systems, and materials that will be needed for future long-duration exploration missions. Every mission yields critical research and learnings that help make life both on Earth and in space better. And flights like today's help us continue to lay this foundation for our future among the stars and continue our mission to make life multiplanetary.
But for now, we'll be signing off from SpaceX, and we're going to send you back over to NASA. But before we go, we do want to thank NASA for entrusting us with today's mission. And of course, thank you to all of the viewers for being here with us today.
Yeah, it was a really special mission. It was fantastic to see now 2 new crew members in orbit and on the way to the International Space Station. So with that, we're going to end our coverage from Hawthorne until we pick back up with our docking coverage in about 26 hours. So for now, we're going to send it back to you, Zena and Daryl at Kennedy Space Center to wrap up today's launch coverage.
Thank you very much, Leah and Atticus, and welcome back here to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where just about 25 minutes ago, we watched Crew-9 lift off from Space Launch Complex 40 for the first time with humans at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. NASA astronaut Nick Hague and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov are now en route to the International Space Station. I'm Daryl Dale, and this is NASA astronaut Zena Cardman, who has been with us for the past 4 hours, documenting Crew-9's path from astronaut crew quarters, suiting up all the way to the rocket, lifting off, and then getting into space today. And I got to watch it with Zena in this role. I get to watch oftentimes as we break, go outside and watch a launch with the astronaut. And in this particular case, Zena, with you being the commander from the beginning and then giving up your seat, you and fellow astronaut Stephanie Wilson, so that those seats could be used by Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams to come back. This has a very close association to you, clearly. What was your reaction there when you were watching them lift off into space?
Yeah, Daryl, I think every crewed launch that I have ever watched has really brought me a lot of emotion. This one today was especially unique. I think it was hard not to watch that rocket lift off without thinking, that's my rocket and that's my crew. But I also know that I'm not the only person who can think that. Of course, we have Stephanie Wilson here today, but I mean, there are many, many people who made this mission happen, and there are people on orbit who will be taking this capsule home. And it makes me very proud to know that I am one of many people who can say, that's my crew, that's my rocket. Makes me really proud, makes me feel very connected to this mission that we all get to take part of. Go Crew-9.
Well said, Zena. And an emotional moment in time out there watching the rocket lift off. And now the work begins. You will start training for the next mission. You spent 1.5 years training for this one. You're now going to go into space at some point. What does the future hold for you at this point?
Yeah, it's a little bit to be determined. We've got a lot of exciting things ahead. I'm looking forward to starting training again at some point. And in the meantime, I can't wait to watch Nick and Alexander and the entire Expedition 72 crew really get to work and execute that mission that we all have worked so hard to make possible.
Yeah, Nick and Alexander will become part of Expedition 72, as you mentioned, when they arrive on Space Station. NASA's Megan Cruz has joined us now with Jennifer Buckley, the chief scientist for the ISS program, with more about the science that's happening on board for Expedition 72. Megan.
Yeah, it's great to have Jen here. And Jen, you know, obviously we saw some changes through the mission, most notably the change from a 4 to a 2-person crew. Did any changes affect the science?
Well, the human research is specific to the crew member. So Butch and Sunny have their science complement that will stay with them. But other than that, we didn't have to adjust our science plans. Butch and Sunny are experienced crew members, so they jumped right in and have been helping us already with science on board, and we were able to keep our plan complement.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I know Expedition 72, they're going to be responsible for making a repair on the NICER instrument on the space station. Can you tell us about that instrument, its significance?
That's right. So NICER is an X-ray telescope that's mounted outside of the International Space Station, and it takes a look at neutron stars. Neutron stars are born from the cinders of a supernova event. They are the leftover material that then form neutron stars, and they're going to be repairing a light leak that occurred in May of 2023, which gave us some degraded detectors on that instrument.
Okay, gotcha. And so that's what we're fixing so that hopefully it works tip-top shape?
That's right. So right now with the damage, we still get full data during darkness. However, during sunlight, it degrades the data that we're able to get. And so when they do that repair in December, we'll bring NICER back up to its full capability.
Oh, perfect. Okay, well, obviously we as NASA look out into the universe, but also we look back at our own Earth. And for those who don't know, one way that we do that and look at our Earth is we have our astronauts take photos from the International Space Station. And I was told that more photos were taken from the ISS of Earth in the last 6 months than all of 2023.
That's right. So in the first 6 months of 2024, they took over 330,000 photographs.
Oh my gosh.
So, you know, this photography, apart from being absolutely beautiful, is really important science imagery. As you mentioned before, this allows us to take a look at our planet, and we can see how it's changing over time, as well as any environmental impacts. We also support the Disaster Response Network. So we're able to look at natural disasters like wildfires or even hurricanes. So we were involved in taking some imagery of Hurricane Helene as well, and we support other government agencies and provide that data.
Yeah, it's always so important to talk about, yes, the work that we do as we look out into the universe, but also as we reflect here on Earth and see what we can do to improve things for everyone. So Jen, thank you so much. Thanks for detailing the science for us. We'll send it back to our folks there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Megan, and good to be back with you here with NASA astronaut Zena Cardman. We are wrapping up our coverage for today after a successful launch of Crew-9. But before we do, I want to know if you take one more social question.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Let's put it up for us. This is, let's see, Maya, age 10, asks, I want to know, because I want to work there, how is it to work at NASA? I want to be an aerospace engineer when I grow up.
That is awesome. Maya, we can't wait to have you in the NASA family. It's an amazing place to work. I love working in spaceflight, human spaceflight especially, and there are so many different types of people with different backgrounds who work. I love that we can all come together for this common goal coming from such different backgrounds. So all you've got to do is apply, and we'll see you soon.
As a young girl yourself, you probably never imagined that you would be here.
I sure did not.
And you made it happen as well.
That's right. Myself, but most especially all of the mentors and family and friends who made me who I am. Takes a team. Well said,
Zena. Now, as we wrap things up, we want to let you know that though our coverage is coming to a close, you can still follow along with Crew-9's entire journey to the station by listening to the mission real-time audio commentary. Just to do that, you can snap that QR code that you see on the screen there, or if you're watching us on your phone, just screen grab it and you can click on it later. Nick and Alexander are on course to arrive at the International Space Station around 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, September 29th. On-camera coverage of docking and arrival will resume about 2 hours before that happens on NASA Plus. And, of course, that's always a big moment when the crew arrives, you know, especially not just for the people who are going there, that's their destination, but for the people who get to see them as well.
Absolutely. It's a really joyful moment. I love few things more than I love watching astronauts fresh through that hatch, hugging each other and welcoming their new crewmates. It's an amazing thing to see.
And there's 3 of them if you count this little guy right here, which you brought on board.
That's right.
This was the zero-G indicator.
That's exactly right. And I absolutely love the history that this zero-G indicator has for Nick Hague specifically. And I'm sure Alexei Ovchinin will be happy to be reunited with that zero-G indicator as well. So getting the band back together.
Seems like it's a good luck charm at this point.
It seems that way.
All right. Well, Zena, I want to thank you for co-hosting with me today. Yeah, I know it was a challenge. It was emotional at times, but thank you for sharing your insight, your experiences, your knowledge, but most of all, your heart. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Daryl. Go Crew-9.
Go Crew-9. All right, with that, we're going to wrap it up and wish you a great day. An important reminder, though, about an upcoming launch in a few weeks here at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida on October 10th at 12:31 p.m. Europa Clipper is scheduled to lift off aboard a SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket on its 5.5-year journey to Jupiter's moon, Europa. You can watch it live right here on NASA Plus starting at 11:30 a.m. Again, huge thanks to all of our guests, for everyone who joined us today. But most importantly, we appreciate you for being here and watching. You can keep up with any Crew-9 updates to the mission using the online resources you see on your screen now. For everyone here at NASA and SpaceX, have a great rest of the day. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon. But we leave you now with a moment looking back at the highlights from suit up to liftoff.
And so it's great to see Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov here in suits that are looking good.
There's Shannon Walker with the two crew members laying out the rules to a card game. Crew-9 leaving the suit-up room and now on the move inside astronaut crew quarters. Nick Hague, commander of Crew-9, with his crewmate Alexander Gorbanov.
So they'll have a chance here to say a few words with those who are closest to them.
This will begin a roughly 20-minute drive with a full security escort across NASA's Kennedy Space Center.
You can see them doing the SpaceX flight suit lean back.
Blocking the crew access arm.
Crew have ingressed the capsule.
Side hatch is closed.
3, 2, 1, ignition. Full power. And liftoff. Crew-9. Go SpaceX. Go Falcon. Go NASA.
Liftoff of Crew-9 now soaring to the International Space Station.
1 Alpha.
1 propulsion is nominal.
Copy, 1 Alpha.
Those 9 Merlin engines now providing 1.7 million pounds of thrust, propelling Falcon 9 and Crew-9 and continuing to get good calls from teams here on the ground.